W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world, Options Trading Academy. The links are in the description. They're also in the comments. What we're going to look at today is how Google is going to duck their antitrust issues with this 20-to-1 stock split. Now, the 20-to-1 stock split came out during their earnings report. So Google just reported earnings a few days ago, and they did extremely well. They beat. The EPS was 30.69. They beat by 3.41. Revenue was 75.33 billion. Year over year, 32.39%. And that's really, really impressive, because what we were seeing is that a lot of companies were having inflated earnings because they grew a lot because of the pandemic, because they were situated in a marketplace to where, because of the pandemic, a lot of people utilized them. And what we were seeing is that as we got farther and farther into 2021, a lot of their growth started to drop off. Year over year growth of 32.39% year over year is really impressive. They beat that by 3.50 billion. Okay, so understand, Google did 75.33 billion, right? And we're looking at the Class A shares over a 90-day period, and it was a beat by 3.50 billion. So it was a big, big, big beat. Okay. Now, what we're going to look at really quickly is that, and I got this from JR Research. So I want to give credit for them for putting up this graphic. What I want you to see is that we're looking at revenue year over year change and operating margin. 2020, 12/20, we saw it was at 12.8%. So operating margins at 22.6%. 12/21 in the year, we saw that the revenue year over year was 41.2, so it went up. And we also saw that the operating margin went up to 30.6%. Those are really, really good numbers, especially in an inflationary period. So that's very, very impressive. So Google has been able to benefit from a lot of what's going on in the world, but they're managing the business so well that their revenue year over year is going up, but the operating margin is also going up also. So we're not getting a drop off in operating margin, even though we're increasing revenues. And that does happen with some businesses based on how their model is created. Now, what we want to show you is that some of the actual statements. So we talk about here in this particular article, the first thing we're going to talk about is YouTube did more money just in YouTube advertising, right, over the quarter than Netflix did as an overall business. And one of the reasons for that is that Netflix could be in a bad position because they're a pure play company, and YouTube really is, to me, a subsidiary or ancillary business to Google's overall business. So they're inside the universe. But in comparing YouTube to Netflix, okay, we talk about Netflix delivered 6.9 billion in advertising revenue. Netflix delivered 7.7 billion in revenue in quarter four. But what you got to understand is that YouTube is just a piece of Google's overall business. Netflix is a pure play. And so YouTube is pretty much almost outperforming or equivalent to the performance of just Netflix as a standalone company. Now, we're not going to factor everything else in. We talk about Google's parent company reported 75.3 billion in revenue for the quarter and 25.76 billion for the year, with Google search advertising making up the lion's share of the revenue. Search advertising, everybody knows, is called AdWords. Fourth quarter revenues was up, and they said it was strong consumer online activity, as well as substantial growth revenue from Google Cloud, which is another segment that they're trying to build out. Okay. On the earnings call, Chief of Business said retail, finance, media, entertainment, and travel were the biggest advertising categories for the company. And so those were the advertising categories that spent the most money paying Google to run their ads. Then with regards to YouTube, the CEO said a whole nother layer of opportunity. And that's what I want people to understand, is that because Google owns YouTube, and I remember when they bought YouTube, because there used to be something called Google Video, and they used to show you videos inside search. And then they bought YouTube, and they kind of like phased Google Video out. They have a whole nother segment, pretty much essentially a whole nother division, where you primarily have creator content, but you also have some content that's been professionally produced. And they're able to run ads on there, right? And they now have essentially a different advertising category, because you're going to have some people that are going to want to advertise on YouTube. You're going to have some people want to advertise via AdWords. You're going to have some people that are going to want to do a combination of both. And that makes it very, very powerful, because you're able to bring in a whole new category of advertisers. The average person sees YouTube as a platform for creators. People that really understand the business model see YouTube as an advertising opportunity. And that's what you got to really understand. And that's how Google actually makes their money. They don't make their money on creating content. They make their money on running ads on content that's already been created. That's going to be the end of that particular article. Now, Google said that they were going to split their stock. So we got a 20-to-1 stock split, right? And one of the things in which that's going to do is that's going to make the shares be able to be afforded by more people. So if you own shares now, I believe in June or July of this year, they're going to split into 20. That's a massive stock split, right? That's a massive stock split. But Google's turning into a monster of a company, okay? And we're going to go into why we think that particular stock split is going to do. But one thing you got to understand about the stock split, your equity position is not going to change, right? So your equity position is not going to change. So essentially, whatever your equity is in Google, even once it splits, it's not going to decrease. You're just going to have more shares. Okay, so I don't want people to get concerned. People think that this particular split is going to allow Alphabet to get into the Dow Jones. And it could. What it's also going to do, in my opinion, is going to make them a lot less volatile. So they're going to split. They're going to go into the Dow. They're probably going to be a lot less volatile. And then what they may turn into now is just almost like a value play. But it also could push the price up, because once they go into the Dow, funds that either mimic the Dow, right, or own the Dow are going to have to buy Alphabet shares. So it could be similar to what happened with Tesla when they went into the S&P, is where funds now have to buy it up because either they are part of the Dow, right? They own the Dow, what I meant to say, or they try to mimic it. So then therefore they got to buy those particular shares. Okay. So that's something that you want to look at. It's so far out into the future, you may not see the impact initially, but as we get closer and closer to that date, you may see buying activity pick up. But here's the reason why I think that they're doing the split, right? I think they're doing the split because of antitrust issues. Okay, so now here's a particular court case in Texas in which Google asked the courts to dismiss the antitrust cases from January 1st, 2020. Right? This is not the first time Google has dealt with this particular accusation of being involved in anti-competitive behavior. And one of the reasons is because they're so big, they're so widespread, and they have so much power over the internet. So Google's the number one search browser. They own YouTube, which is pretty much one of the biggest social media platforms in the whole world. Okay. They not only own that, they have something called Google Display Network, which goes over around about 2 million websites. So therefore, they're able to dictate to businesses what the advertising rules are or are not going to be. They can deplatform you. They can de-index you off of Google. And a lot of people or a lot of governments think that that's anti-competitive behavior. But the problem is Google, because of their capital, because of their ability to lobby, it can be hard to make a case against them that people are going to entertain. And I believe one of the reasons why Google is doing the stock split is because it's going to make the shares more accessible to more people. And it's going to look better to where the shares are around $2,000 now. If we lower the price of the shares to maybe a few $100s, this stock is more accessible. More of the public can now own it. And then it can kind of lessen or diminish this idea that they're involved in essentially monopoly behavior. So this is a really good article from the New York Times in which the state of Texas says that Google has obtained and abused a monopoly over the labyrinth set of systems that allow publishers to auction off ad space to marketers. That's true. But the problem is that will a jury or a judge see that as being monopoly or being illegal? So the states argue that Google has misled publishers and advertisers about the nature of the ad auctions, allowing it to pocket more money flowing through its ad systems. And they say the company used a deal with Facebook to maintain its dominance when the publishers try to develop an alternative system. Right? We're at a place now to where, people call this the tech giants. They have so much power over the internet. And one of the reasons why they have so much power over the internet is because they have the audiences. And, I may do a video on a little later about why a lot of these alternative platforms don't work. But what they've convinced people to do is that it makes more sense to build your stuff on our platform than to try to build it anywhere else. As a result, they can dictate because, wow, I have all the eyeballs. So most people know about AdWords if they know anything about it. Most people know about YouTube ads because they're on YouTube. But what I want you to understand is that Google has a massive right? A massive advertising inventory that a lot of people cannot wrap their head around. So AdWords is search. So people type into Google, they want to see something, and it comes up in AdWords search. Then you have YouTube. YouTube does have a search feature, but it really doesn't work as well as Google overall search, because the way YouTube displays a lot of stuff, a lot of times it won't have anything to do with what you typed into, but they do run ads on YouTube. Then you have something called Google Display Network, right? So Google will tell you that Google Display Network reaches 2 million websites, videos. And what Google Display Network is similar to like old school banner ads. However, you got to understand that as an advertiser or as a publisher, when you know how to create synergy between all of these particular platforms, it can be very powerful. This is what I want you to understand. So you have your offer. Now you take that to YouTube, you run ads. Then you're using retargeting. You can run people back to Google Display Network, or you can run people back to YouTube ads. I've been targeted on YouTube for ads, watch the ad, and then notice that when I'm searching through Google online, I'm getting display ads for that same offer. Then also you can do your offer. You can run AdWords, right, with a search intent. Somebody lands on your website through the AdWords search or lands on your lander. Then now you can retarget them on Google Display Network. And you have to understand is that when you're in these environments, AdWords is bidding, YouTube is bidding. You know, you got to pay what they say you got to pay. You know, you can't. So whatever they tell you, you got to pay to get displayed. You got to pay to get displayed. Why? Because you want to access the audience that's on their platforms. You understand me? And when you look at the kind of money that Google's bringing in, it's working for them. And so you want to understand what the real business of Google is. Many people think YouTube, the real business is the creators. No, the real business is the advertising. Therefore, Google, let me go back to here real quick. How much did YouTube bring in? Let's go back to here. YouTube delivered $6.9 billion in advertising revenue over 90 days. Okay. They don't mind paying some guy $2 million in ad revenue because they're driving $6.9 billion in a quarter. It's not money. It's money to us. It's not money to them. But the creators that are creating so much content is giving YouTube the canvas. I'm sorry. They're creating the content, but they're also driving the eyeballs, are giving YouTube the canvas that they need to run the ads on. YouTube gets more money from the advertisers than they get from what they pay out. You got to understand the business model. Therefore, YouTube has been very successful in not only convincing people that this is a good platform to create content at, but convincing people that the payouts are worth their while, which in turn drives more advertisers. So they have a really, really good flywheel. The more people that create content on YouTube, and the more people that see other people become successful on YouTube by creating content, right? The more people that go to create content, which means the more people that advertise on YouTube because the eyeballs are there, which means the more money that YouTube makes. So they just have a really good flywheel. It's working for them. And with Facebook now showing that people are not advertising as much as they were previously, and it was really weird because normally Facebook reports really strong for the fourth quarter. For them not to show that they're able to drive the same amount of advertising dollars, it puts Google in a really, really powerful position right now. And if Google can keep up what they're doing and Facebook can't figure it out, low key, it might mean like Facebook might not be around in 5, maybe 10 more years. Okay, because it seems that Google is, especially YouTube, is picking up momentum. And it seems that maybe Facebook may be losing momentum. And this is why I tell people all the time, every business has a lifespan. There is no guarantee, no matter how much money you put into a business, that's going to last forever. And people got to put their head around that. So that's going to be this particular discussion. Hope you got value from it. If you got any questions, hit me up in the comments. This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. I'll talk to you later.